I want to give a big sloppy shout out over to Elliotte Friedman, who went out there and posted his written 32 Thoughts article last night at 11:26 p.m. Now, I'm on the West Coast. Obviously, if you are on the eastern side of things, this article was posted at 2 a.m. in the morning. If you are in Milano Cortina, though, you're in Europe. Obviously, the article came out at a much more opportune time in the morning in Italy. But we'll just assume that the majority of the people that watch these videos are in North America. Elliotte Friedman's Written 32 has some really interesting news and updates in regards to Artemi Panarin, the LA Kings, some trade rumors sprinkled in there, and a little bit of Montreal Canadiens discourse. So I'm going to leave a link in the description to this article. Take a look at 32 Thoughts from earlier this morning, 1:43 a.m. The Montreal Canadiens fan in me wants to talk about thought number 9. Eric Engels dropped a really good interview with Jeff Gordon. My theory is that the Montreal Canadiens like Ryan O'Reilly, but we don't know if he'll go anywhere. There's been a lot of Blake Coleman talk, but I don't believe that's feasible. And linked is Eric Engels' article with Jeff Gordon from earlier yesterday morning, how Jeff Gordon and the Montreal Canadiens would like to be aggressive, and they will be, if need be. Obviously, being aggressive on the ice is a good thing, but Gordon is actually referring to being aggressive in trades, and how the Canadiens will explore all possibilities ahead of the NHL trade deadline. Jeff Gordon has some really interesting conversation with Eric Engels over here, but ultimately, I wanted to talk about what Friedge said, Ryan O'Reilly and Blake Coleman. The thing is, if you read about Ryan O'Reilly and the Predators, there are a number of elements that you can bring up when it comes to this Nashville team. Friedge says that Nashville's begun feeling out potential hockey ops leaders. It's still very early, though. This is, of course, coming off the heels of Barry Trotz and his departure from the Nashville Predators GM role. Another player to add to your trade boards, Jonathan Marchessault. Nashville has big names and strong complementary players, but I sometimes forget Marchessault. And now I've been reminded a couple of times that he has control. But there is a willingness between team and player for something to happen. In regards to Ryan O'Reilly, though, this is one of these weird situations where I would say that if Ryan O'Reilly were to be a Canadian, he would be a pretty good fit. You can be kind of stingy on the player profile at the same time, however. You can say, wait a minute, didn't the Canadiens just get Philippe Deneau? He's a two-way, defensively minded face-off winning center who's a little bit older. Ryan O'Reilly is exactly the same thing. 34 years old, 6'1", 216, left-handed guy, listed as a face-off specialist, playmaker, and two-way center at $4.5 million a year till the end of 2027. Does he have any trade protection? Let's go out there and check puckpedia.com. Okay, so no trade protection whatsoever, which means he is able to get traded to Montreal if the Preds and the Habs decided to get that done. O'Reilly, though, is more productive than Philippe Deneau, and I think he always has been. This season, he's got 56 points in 57 games played, on pace for 81 points. That's a great season out of Ryan O'Reilly, especially for a team like Nashville. Last year, he had 53 points in 79 games, so he's already eclipsed his point production from one season ago in 20 fewer games. That's a great stat line out of O'Reilly. He leads the Predators in points. He leads the Predators in assists. He's been having a really nice season. And technically speaking, I mean, he is outproducing that Conn Smythe winning year that he had back with the Blues when they ended up winning the Stanley Cup. Now, I get it. He had 77 points in that year, so obviously that was a great season. But the production he had in the postseason, which led St. Louis to beating Boston in the finals, obviously stands out in most Blues fans' minds as to being a legendary performance for St. Louis in their history. O'Reilly, at this stage of his career, is arguably playing the best hockey of his life. But the question is, would he be interested in heading over to a team like Montreal? One of the big reasons he even went to Nashville in the first place was because he didn't like that spotlight in Toronto. It was unfortunate because O'Reilly was productive there, under a point per game in both the regular season and playoff stint that he had with the Maple Leafs, but the spotlight was just too bright. That's not to say that he can't handle it, it's more to say that he just kind of doesn't like to. And it was already reported that, hey, Toronto was a good fit for him on ice-wise, but he just didn't like the pressure, he didn't like the media, he didn't like the spotlight, he didn't like being a focal point of Toronto society, it seemed like. All that pressure and all of those expectations for a team that consistently loses led to O'Reilly going to a quote-unquote quieter hockey town like Nashville. If he were to get sent over to Montreal, you would say that maybe those similar elements that made Toronto such a hot spot for hockey talent would be present once again. Although I do think that Maple Leafs fans are a bit more toxic towards their team, especially these days, than Canadiens fans are. I mean, just look at the amount of grace that Habs fans give Patrik Laine every time he is brought up in conversation. But Elliotte Friedman does go out there and mention Blake Coleman's name as well as a potential Montreal Canadiens target. We can dive into Coleman and his profile too. He's a 34-year-old winger, contract expires at the end of 2027, so eerily similar to O'Reilly. They're both 34. Their contracts both go on till 2027. O'Reilly's making 4.5, Blake Coleman is making 4.9. So these guys are essentially the same contract for the same aged player, except Blake Coleman does not play center. He plays wing, and this season he's got 21 points in 44 games. Definitely not as talented of a point producer compared to Ryan O'Reilly this season. And I think it's been the case like that for most of Blake Coleman's NHL career. I mean, a career high of 54 points in 78 games definitely isn't bad, but 54 points is what O'Reilly did last year in a down year. So Blake Coleman, if he's more prone to moving, I could understand why Montreal might pivot their focus to a guy like him. He provides a lot of those similar elements, except on the wing rather than at center. O'Reilly obviously would be more valuable. More points, a premium position, his defensive acumen, and his reputation. But whether or not O'Reilly would be interested in going to Montreal is an entirely different thing. I guess at this point, it's kind of like, Friedman is acknowledging that we don't know if a Ryan O'Reilly conversation to Montreal would go anywhere, but the guy doesn't have any trade protection. He can just get traded no matter what it is that he feels, right? Like, are we really thinking it's possible for these NHL players to reject trades if they don't have trade protection? I mean, I can recall a few examples off the top of my head where we've heard about players who don't want to go places that they ended up getting traded to or drafted by. But is it that serious that Ryan O'Reilly would refuse to play for Montreal and refuse to provide solid hockey if he were to get sent over there? He'd be a nice addition to the top six. No disrespect to Oliver Kapanen, but he's no Ryan O'Reilly, especially at this stage of O'Reilly's career. So I do wonder whether or not it's actually worth exploring for Kent Hughes. If it doesn't work out, if O'Reilly just hates it in Montreal, then you could trade him again at the offseason. He's got no trade protection. You could just send him back over to America. That's perfectly valid, I would say. I do think that O'Reilly is a more tangible piece and a more moldable, high-quality asset compared to Blake Coleman. So if either of these guys are available, obviously O'Reilly would cost more, but I do think that this is the player that's worth going after. And Elliotte Friedman brought it up on 32 Thoughts, so I thought it'd be cool to make a video about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. How do you feel about Ryan O'Reilly and the idea that Montreal would be targeting him in a trade? Do you agree with this assessment? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments all your opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.